Armored vehicles have been a backbone of military operations for decades, evolving in design, yet many still serving today. In this video, we'll look at the 10 oldest armored vehicles that are surprisingly still in use around the world today. We won't be including tanks here since we've already covered the oldest tanks in a separate video. Now, if you're interested in that, make sure to check out the link provided. So let's dive into the history and resilience of these armored vehicles. The 10th oldest armored vehicle still in use today is the OT64 Scott. This was developed jointly by Czechoslovakia and Poland during the early 1960s as a wheeled armored personnel carrier to supplement Warsaw Pact forces. It entered service in 1963, and it is an 8x8 amphibious APC, which was equipped with a 14.5mm KPVT heavy machine gun in a small turret and could carry up to 18 soldiers in the rear. Around 4,500 units were built, and it was widely exported across the Warsaw Pact, Africa, and the Middle East. In modern times, it is considered obsolete, but continues to serve in Africa, particularly in Angola and other low-intensity theaters. Number 9. The BRDM2. This was introduced by the Soviet Union in 1962 as a successor to the BRDM1, designed to be a reconnaissance vehicle with amphibious capabilities. It is a 4x4 armored car with light armor and a turret mounting a 4.5mm KPVT heavy machine gun. Around 7,200 BRDM2s were produced and exported to over 40 countries, making it one of the most widely used Scout cars in the Cold War era. It has seen combat in the Middle East, Africa, Afghanistan, and Eastern Europe. Today, it remains in service in dozens of armies and militias. In Ukraine and Syria, BRDM2s are still actively deployed, often in modified forms. Number 8. The OT62 Topas. This was a joint Polish-Czechoslovak project introduced in 1962, serving as a tracked amphibious armored personnel carrier. The vehicle could carry about 18 soldiers and was armed with either a 14.5mm KPVT heavy machine gun or twin 7.62mm machine guns, depending on the variant. Roughly 4,500 units were built, serving across the Warsaw Pact and exported widely to Africa and the Middle East. It saw combat in conflicts in the Middle East, particularly in Egyptian and Syrian service during the Arab-Israeli wars. Although phased out by its origin countries decades ago, it is still in limited use in Africa and Asia, where surplus models remain. The 7th oldest armored vehicle still in use today is the Panhard AML. This French armored vehicle was introduced in 1961. It is a 4x4 wheeled vehicle armed in different variants with either a 60mm mortar or a 90mm cannon, given its surprising firepower for its small size. Around 4,812 units were built and was exported to more than 30 countries worldwide, especially in Africa and the Middle East. The AML became famous for its extensive combat use, from Algeria to the South African border war and numerous African conflicts. Today, AMLs are still in use in Morocco, Senegal, and other African states where their mobility suits the environment. Number 6. The M113. The American M113 was introduced in 1960 as a lightweight tracked armored personnel carrier, pioneering the use of aluminium armor for mobility and protection. It could carry a crew of 2 plus 15 infantry, armed with a 50 caliber M2 Browning machine gun on the roof. With over 80,000 built, the M113 became the most widely produced armored vehicle of its type, serving in Vietnam War and numerous other conflicts worldwide. Today, it remains in use in over 50 countries, including frontline combat in Ukraine, where it has been provided as military aid. While obsolete against modern threats, it continues to serve in support roles such as logistics, medical evacuation, and command posts. At number 5, we have the BTR-60. This was introduced by the Soviet Union in 1959, and it was the first mass-produced 8x8 wheeled armored personnel carrier in Soviet service. Carried a crew of 2 and up to 14 infantry, protected against small arms and shell fragments, and armed with a 14.5mm KPVT heavy machine gun in later versions. Approximately 25,000 were built and exported to many Soviet-aligned countries during the Cold War. The BTR saw action in conflicts from the Arab-Israeli wars to Afghanistan and numerous African wars. Today, BTR-60s are still used in Ukraine and in militia forces across Africa, though usually in secondary roles. The fourth oldest armored vehicle still in use today is the BTR-50. The BTR-50 was introduced in 1954 by the Soviet Union as a tracked amphibious APC based on the PT-76 light tank chassis. It could carry a crew of 2 and up to 20 infantry in its large rear compartment. It is armed with a 7.62mm or 14.5mm machine gun for self-defense. Production numbers are estimated at around 6,000 units, with a widespread distribution to Warsaw Pact and Allied nations. It saw combat in Middle Eastern wars, including the 1973 Arab-Israeli conflicts. It remains in use in North Korea, Syria, and Ukraine, where older stocks has been reactivated. Number 3 on the list for top 10 oldest armored vehicles still in use today is the Ferret Armored Car. This was a British design introduced in 1952 as a 4x4 scout and reconnaissance vehicle for post-war armies. It featured small dimensions, light armor, and a turret with a 7.62mm machine gun. Around 4,409 were built and exported widely to Commonwealth nations and Middle East allies. Today, ferrets are still in limited use in Sri Lanka, Lebanon, and several African nations, often in policing or counter-insurgency roles. Many survive in reserve storage, with some even in private collections, highlighting its simple yet endearing design. The second oldest armored vehicle still in use today is the BTR-40. This was introduced in 1950 by the Soviet Union, and it was the first mass-produced post-war Soviet armored personnel carrier. It is armed with a 7.62mm machine gun. About 8,500 were built and widely exported to Warsaw Pact and Allied states, particularly in the Middle East and Asia. It saw combat in numerous Cold War proxy wars, from Vietnam to the Middle East. By the 1970s, it was largely obsolete but remained in the second-line units and militias. Today, it can still be found in North Korea and some African armies, although it is in very limited numbers. And now the oldest armored vehicle still in use today is the M8 Light Armored Car. It was an American 6x6 armored car introduced in 1943, designed primarily for reconnaissance during World War II. It was armed with a 37mm M6 gun and a coaxial machine gun, with a crew of 4 and light armor protection. Over 8,500 units were produced and widely distributed to US and Allied forces, where it served in Europe and the Pacific. After the war, many were exported under militia and programs to Latin America, Africa, and Asia. It saw combat in later conflicts such as the Indochina War, the Portuguese Colonial War, and Central America. Despite its age, it is still in service in countries like Paraguay and Guatemala, often in reserve or police roles. The Madagascar Armed Forces still had M8s in service as of 2024. Its long survival comes from ease of maintenance, simplicity of design, and the huge surplus available after World War II. Thank you guys for viewing in. We'll see you guys in our next video. Stay tuned, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.